Hello everyone, this is Serious Trivia. Welcome back to the fourth and last part of our Yellow Turban character guide series. In this guide, we will be covering the veteran class, so let's get started. As we discussed in part 1, the veteran class has 5 distinct backgrounds as shown here in the Astrologer, Monk, Philosopher, Sorcerer, and Writer. Today we'll dive deeper into each of these backgrounds by looking at their skill trees. So to begin, let's first review all the veteran skills that are shared between all 5 skill trees. Starting from the left here, we start with Fanaticism, which grants own retinue 10% bonus melee damage and melee armor piercing damage, as well as 5% replenishment for own army. The replenishment bonus itself is enough to make this a must-have skill, and the 10% damage boost is essential for any melee army composition as well. Moving on, we shift to Focus, which grants 10% range damage and range armor piercing damage, as well as a 3% faction-wide bonus to industry income. As you can probably already tell, the veteran class skills are going to be all combat related, as Fanaticism boosts melee damage, while Focus here boosts range damage. Next we have Opportunism, which enables fire arrows, increases post-battle loot by 50% when present, so you can technically stack this one up to 6 times in any given battle. Additionally, both ranged and melee armor piercing damage will receive another 5% damage boost. Lastly, we have Subtlety, which enables guerrilla deployment for own retinue and night battle for own army. Now that we know veteran skills are heavily focused on combat, we should pay close attention to the 3 active skills as well, since they can be very handy on the battlefield. Starting with Disorient, which is the free level 1 skill available for all veterans, we have an active skill that can immobilize nearby units for 10 seconds. This is very good for kiting a small detachment of enemy units away from the main force, as well as for stopping enemy charges right before they hit your front line. Next we have Commanding Shout, which is a really powerful active buff as it grants nearby allies 15% speed, 10% melee base and armor piercing damage, 50 melee charge bonus, and unbreakable for 30 seconds. This ability is insane, as it can transform even a group of peasant warriors into a pack of unbreakable killers that can crash into enemy lines and deal massive damage without worrying about morale loss and routing. Lastly, we have Strength of the Land, which is a passive buff that grants all nearby allies 1,900% charge resistance and 10% armor. This is a decent bonus. As you can imagine, a veteran with all 3 skills starts out in a fight behind your front line, giving them this bonus as their boost. Then as enemies come closer, you can activate Disorient to freeze them in place to disrupt their charge. Follow that up with a Commanding Shout as all your men charges forward on the immobilized enemies for a massive amount of damage. So with that all said, let's dive deeper into what make all 5 backgrounds unique and see what role each should play in our faction. Starting with the Astrologer, we have a background that grants 5 points to Expertise, Cunning, and Instinct with a leadership bonus of plus 35 commandery line of sight. Now, this leadership bonus is pretty bad, but as we will soon see, the veteran class leadership bonuses are not going to get any better. The starting skill on the Astrologer is Subtlety, which means they can be added right away to any army for the night battle effect. More importantly, the 8 non-veteran class skills are Charisma and Effortless Flow from the Healer class, Resolution and Integrity from the Scholar class, and Composure, Mobility, Zeal, and Vengeance from the base game. With these skills in mind, the best role for Astrologer veterans is to lead a local defensive force. This is because with Mobility, Vengeance, and Charisma skills, your Astrologers can add 30 points of morale to your units when commanding the army. Now, this 30 points of morale is going to be huge for cheap, low-level units who you will most likely rely on for your defensive force. Additionally, whether you go with peasant archers, warriors, or spearmen, your units will enjoy all the veteran skill benefits as listed here, which is basically almost all the damage boosting available to any Yellow Turban character. On top of all this, when there are no wars, this defensive army will still add 2 public order, minus 20% corruption, minus 1 construction turn, as well as 3% to industry income just for being out on the field. So this is why the Astrologer background is ideal to become your cheap, defensive commanding general. Moving on, we have the monk background, which grants 5 points to expertise, resolve, and authority. It also has the leadership bonus of +5 military supply, which again is just a terrible leadership bonus. The starting skill for monks will be opportunism, and monks also share the same skill tree as the sorcerer background, which boosts expertise by 10 points and instinct by 5 points. The leadership bonus continues to be terrible, as the sorcerer with all its magic can only grant you -1 mustering turn. The 8 non-veteran skills on the monks and sorcerer skill tree are tranquility and defiance for the healer class, insight and inspiration from the scholar class, and endurance, meditation, resourcefulness, and reach from the base game. Now, before we continue discussing what are the best builds for these two backgrounds, we need to first take a look at the high-end units available to the veteran class. First off, we have the mighty Trebuchet, which is a must-have unit in any offensive army composition. So right off the bat, the veteran class has to take 2 Trebuchets, which is my preferred number of Trebuchets in an army. At the minimum, you need to have 1, and although 6 might be a little overboard, I don't really have a legit argument against it either, because Trebuchets are just that insane of a unit. Now, if you happen to build army comps like myself and stick to 2 Trebuchets, then you have 4 remaining slots on your veteran. So in those slots, you can either go with the frontline route with Reclaimers, or the range route with Men of the Forest or the Watchmen of the Peace. Reclaimers are upgraded versions of the Yellow Turban Spearmen and act like spear guards from the base game. They're probably the best frontline option available to Yellow Turban factions, so you can't go wrong here. If you happen to run an army composition where you either don't need a front line or have your healers running the previously mentioned cheaper spearmen, then you're definitely going to want to add some range unit to complement your trebuchets and add more damage to your composition. Of the 2 units shown here, the Watchman of the Peace, or the crossbow unit, is the far superior choice, as it has higher morale, higher charge damage, higher base damage, more armor, and a whopping 50% range block chance, not to mention the insanely high 45 armor piercing range damage and 250 range. The only areas where the Men of the Forest wins out here is that they have a higher melee armor piercing damage, higher range base damage, and a much faster rate of firing. So with that in mind, let's recommend some builds for the Monk and Sorcerer. The first build here is the Commanding Trebuchet General build. This build takes advantage of the resourcefulness and reach skills from the base game that gives your trebuchets Flaming Shot and gives the army you command 25% campaign movement range. One caveat is that if you already have a healer character leading the army with reach, then you can definitely skip out on reach here. Additionally, this build adds 10 morale when defending and enables the unbeatable, unbreakable, and recovery combination as well. And of course, whether you decide to go with Reclaimers or Watchmen of the Peace, you have access to all the nice veteran damage boosts shown here. Besides being great generals, your monk and sorcerer can also become great idle court characters, as they have access to all 4 passive faction-wide bonuses to boost your peasantry and industry income by 3%, commerce income by 6%, and research rate by 10%. Lastly, the sorcerer background can also be made into a decent leader. Yes, the -1 turn mustering is terrible, but the +1 army from reach is decent, as army counts for Yellow Turbans can be quite limited and can be quite powerful, as they not only can be a fighting force, but also provide powerful local commandery buffs like corruption reduction. Moving on, we have the Philosopher background, which boosts cunning by 10 points and authority by 5 points. Additionally, there are no leadership bonuses on the Philosopher background. Instead, you receive an immediate 5% boost to research rate. This is an amazing bonus and a great design change that should be encouraged for future background design, as there are only so many leadership roles in the game. The level 1 free skill for Philosopher is Fanaticism, and the 8 non-veteran skills are Tranquility and Effortless Flow from the Healer class, Insight and Resolution from the Scholar class, and Resourcefulness, Stability, Understanding, and Intensity from the base game. Since Philosophers have the resourcefulness on the skill tree, they can also become great candidates for Trebuchet generals, especially since they also have 10 points added to their cunning stat, but the lack of reach and other useful base game skills make them just decent for this choice. Where Philosophers shines the most is as idle court or assignment characters. While they're missing the 6% commerce boost, they do make up for it by having a total of 15% research rate boost as they get the 5% extra from their background. Aside from that, they have access to 2 useful base game assignments in Counteract Corruption and Industrial Exploitation to complement their court character roles. Finally, we have the Writer background, which boosts Expertise, Cunning, and Authority by 5 points each, with a leadership bonus of +1 rank for all new recruit. Now, this is probably the best leadership bonus for the veteran class, so that says a lot in itself. And the level 1 skill for Writer is Focus, which is nice since you get a 3% boost to industry right away. The 8 non-veteran skills for the Writer background are Defiance and Charisma from the Healer class, Integrity and Inspiration from the Scholar class, and Abundance, Clarity, Diligence, and Fury from the base game. Since the Writer is missing resourcefulness, we're just not going to consider them as generals, as Trebuchet is just not as good without Flaming Shot. Instead, the only build that I can recommend for the Writer is to make them your leader, as you get a nice unit rank boost and 25 experience per season on all your units from the Diligence skill. So in summary, we have the Astrologer, who is best for leading cheap units on defense, as they can boost morale and provide local commandery bonuses for just being on the field. Monks and Sorcerers are great commanding generals who can utilize Trebuchets and run either a frontline or range composition to complement them. They are also great idle court characters as they have all 3 income buff as well as research rate bonus. Lastly, Sorcerers can also become decent leaders, as all the other alternatives in the veteran class are all pretty bad. Philosophers make great idle court characters and assignment characters, as they have the most unique background in the game because the 5% research rate is not attached to any leadership roles. And because they also have resourcefulness, so they can also become decent Trebuchet generals. Lastly, we have the Writer background, which is another decent choice to make into your leader. Even though all the leader choices here are not ideal, you always have to make one veteran become your general of the land, so make do with what you have and pick a good Writer or Sorcerer with complementary traits to become your leader. And this concludes our Yellow Turban character guide series. I will put out a bonus episode sometime next week that will put together the army composition discussions that we had in each of these 3 class videos to showcase some ideal full army compositions with 3 to 6 generals that you can utilize in your game. So please consider subscribing to support this channel and to get notifications for when new guides come out. Thank you again for watching, and see you next time. Bye!